TaskUs On Air presents CX+U.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to TaskUs On Air. I'm Brett Ransom. With me today I have Siva, Raghava, and welcome to CX+U, the most ridiculously refreshing podcast on all things outsourcing. So today our topic is trust and safety, and the title of our podcast today is Protecting Platforms from Adversarial Content with Generative AI. So in the next 15 minutes, we're going to explore a hot topic, and Siva is going to take us through his perspective on trust and safety as it relates to generative AI. And we'll talk through a lot of topics about where the industry's at, some of the risks that companies should consider, where TaskUs fits into this, and a host of other topics. So let's get started. I'm Brett Ransom. I'm Vice President of Sales at TaskUs. And Siva, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello all, my name is Siva. I lead the trust and safety practice at TaskUs. I'm the senior director here, and I've been in the trust and safety space for over 15 years. Spend a lot of time both on the AI as well as machine learning, as well as the human moderation side, working for different platforms, as well as on the BPO space. It's exciting time, and love to be a part of this discussion.
Thanks for joining. It's good to see you. We got to hang out in Dublin last month in person, which was a lot of fun. We've got a background in general content moderation, but how do the risks in the generative AI or the AI world, how do they compare? How are they different? What do you see that stands out?
The difference that I see here is, the Gen AI as a product is still being evolved compared to the traditional content moderation work where, there's user-generated content out there. There is ground truth requirements, validation out there. But, in a Gen AI, everyone is learning as they go. So the key callouts here in terms of risks is what's my quality data in terms of training looking like? How strong are my adversarial testing policies in this space? How strong are my cohorts of people who are manually reviewing this type of content? And how do we stay differentiated and ahead of the game in terms of managing a lot of the new product features that are getting almost launched by the day? There is this whole plethora of complexity, content pollution, user experience, regulatory environment, as well as policy testing that's coming into existence as the Gen AI role plays in the world.
Where do we specifically fit in with that? Or maybe just any general outsourcer, right? When to leverage a partner like a TaskUs or frankly, any of our competitors versus, a company managing it in-house? Are there inflection points in which they say, hey, maybe we should look at a partner? How do they think through that?
Yeah, I think the whole difference that comes up in this space is how well we are managing our cohorts of people who are reviewing this space. What are the governance mechanisms that we put in place while testing and training the data, right? So I'm going to touch upon the first area where TaskUs has really got an amazing experience in this space. We have got years of experience in managing the right set of people who are reviewing the content. They come from a different group of background. We have close to about 1,000 PhDs, close to about 10,000 master's degree holders, biologists, medical experts, psychologists, economists, and even content creator writers, right? The reason, this diversity is important is primarily because Gen AI needs elimination of bias, right? And bias can be in different form that can creep in while you are generating prompts as well as giving responses. So one really needs to come from a diverse set of group of cohort to understand what's the cultural nuance, geographical importance, and the type of content that is getting generated using these prompts. So that's the real differentiator in this space compared to a traditional content moderation BPO providing services in this space. Second is obviously the adversarial testing. How well do we predict? How well do we form strong groups to test, right? And feed that back into the AI at the right time is going to be very, very critical, right? So the key differences, and that's where TaskUs is well positioned in the market, is the cohort and the diverse set of people who are reviewing this content, which really creates a learning feedback loop, effective learning feedback loop, and in a timely and an efficient manner.
Yeah, and how does that work, right? We see things in the news about deep fakes and misinformation that can instantly be generated with this new AI technologies. Maybe take us through how does a task us identify that, address it, feed that back to the client so that it gets addressed and happens less frequently in future iterations or future sessions from the consumers that are accessing the tools.
Absolutely. There are two ways to look at this, right? So the first and the most prominent area that's there is, the platforms have their own systems in place, AI algorithms in place, which detect and try to see if the content is good or bad, and then they leverage Tasker's help in terms of trying to curate and manage the content depending upon the policies that's there. The differentiator for us, I think the new unique way that's emerging is housing all of these tools, all of these algorithms, and all of these policies at one place, including the human reviewers, right? The benefit that you get when you house all of these at one place is one, the learning feedback gets faster. You tend to immediately pass on good, bad content that has been reviewed, categorized, including the prompts and the responses back to the AI, and the processes are not broken, right? So that's one method of curating Gen AI content. The other method is as I spoke about, which is more around adversarial testing and creating a cohorts, a group of people to identify misinformation, fake news, imagery, text detections, and also creating a repository of all of these bad content instances so that they can be referred back as and when the same content repeats in itself.
Most of the world now has some access to a Gen AI platform. What are the risks they should consider as they access a Gen AI tool or platform from a security standpoint?
You bring in a very important and interesting topic, Brett. I was recently discussing this with my father, right? And we were chatting as to how most of the platforms today hold a billion people data, their movements online, how the responses and the prompts that the users are seeing and feeding into these platforms are getting detected, tracked, monitored, and reported back in various forms. So there's a lot of accountability and responsibility that also needs to be driven when you specifically handle such bad type of content, right? So there is definitely security risks involved. Imagine a billion people data is leaked for a bad purpose, right? So there is a huge repercussions that the world needs to face, and it has got lot of impact in terms of political, social, and even economic behaviors that emerge, right? So uh, specifically, the bunch of kids who are prompting, responding in a gaming environment. So there's every chance that there are deepfakes that are involved. There is abuse. There is revenge porn. There's IP issues that really come into picture, right? So and there's a lot of content pollution that can happen in terms of scam and spams that needs to be controlled, right? So in terms of security risk, I would say compared to the traditional content moderation models, which are much more matured in this space, who have been dealing with such type of content for like over 10 to 15 years right now, compared to the new age type of content that is getting generated, needs much more attention, much more faster response, and much more efficient way of handling at an AI level, right? So really the AI and the human combination doesn't go away. It really has to be asynchronous. It really needs to come into a point where all of the policies, all of the adversarial testing mechanisms needs to be clearly defined, and every single content that is getting responded or prompted needs to be addressed at the grassroots level.
Where we've come in the last, say, 15 years, but with the advent of frankly, technology and high-speed internet and mobility, and then you layered in social media, and all of a sudden we had problems, right? Starting in the early 2012, 2013, and it's just gotten tougher and tougher since then. But when it comes to some of the challenges that maybe we're seeing in the social media space from a content moderation and trust and safety, I think of just like the political environment in the last couple of elections where that was never an issue in 2004, 2008, or 2012. All of a sudden now it changed, and you're making up policies that for the first time. How does this world with Gen AI compare to that from your perspective, and knowing that we're still in the early stages of it?
I truly believe that Gen AI cannot probably replace, or for that matter, any algorithm can replace human paranoia and intention. right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the differentiation between drawing the lines comes into picture between AI and human, and that's exactly where I'm going to touch upon a concept called alignment. How do we align AI with human values, and how can taskers partner with our clients to basically iterate the guidelines, iterate the policies, continuously look at the new type of content that's getting emerged in this place, right? And how do we drive all those alignments right at the AI, human, and operations level, and then again feed that back into the system, right? That
Right.
is very, very critical, and that process is only going to evolve, but it's never going to be a space where 100% of the content will get automated, and there would be no requirement for a human intervention, right? So there would be always a content which gets undetected. There would be
Mm-hmm.
always a content which has gray area in it, and that's where the AI and human value combination comes into picture.
Yeah, and when you talk about human value, right, as you mentioned with bias, right, whose human values? Is it the technology company that's building the Gen AI tool? Is it our values? Is it the moderator's values? And there's no real answer to that, right? It's yes to all of them, but it requires a holistic loop of continuous feedback to say, hey, is this still right? When it comes to supporting the frontline moderators or the humans, what are things that a company should consider when they're reviewing potentially harmful or egregious content or deep fakes, or how do you support them in their own individual wellness?
I think the wellness in the Gen AI space assumes even more important, primarily because the content is emerging. We do not know what kind of toxic content the individual moderator is exposed to. So
Right.
I would primarily focus on deploying more wellness at the initial phase. As the content, as the processes get matured, probably we could look at a space where we could strike a balance between wellness and other governance metrics that we want to drive for generating growth business. But in terms of where we really excel and where we could really do a good job, and where we do really a good job, is better training and in finding the vulnerabilities that are involved in the content. And basically vulnerabilities in the content in a Gen AI context, I mean out of distribution data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Identifying the data points which do not align with the distributions from the actual content and the training data is very, very critical. And that's how we put a lot of our effort in training our folks in identifying these vulnerabilities, right? And the last part is around contextualizing the policies for safer content. Typically, how do we look at profanity? How do we
Mm-hmm.
define slurs? Depending upon the context of a particular geography, a culture, right? And how do we create a repository of all of this profanity and slur words, and also ensure that there is the right policy enforcement done at a human as well as an AI level is going to be very, very critical. Yeah. To answer your question short, it's definitely going to be adversarial testing again, contextualizing the
Right.
policies and ensuring that there is better training given to both the AI and the human.
Yeah, and I should just for some of the laymen, but adversarial testing, maybe you can just share what that means.
Yeah, so adversarial testing is basically, you form a red team. Now, red team would be considering of different cohorts of folks who are policy specialists, who come from a very critical, resilient background, who manage undesired behavior, identifying undesired bias, so identifying the content at the right time, right? So you basically the group tests this data in using different statistical measures, using different, models to come up with areas where there is out of distribution data, or identify where there is vulnerability that actually should be plugged in the data. In simple words, if I'm prompting for a text image, and the text image says that, hey, can you please send me an image having a child eating a detergent, right? If you look at
Right.
in a traditional content moderation world, that could pass, but in a generative AI, it will be more like like a toxic content, because actually you're asking for a kid to promoting a kid to basically send a response eating a detergent, and I'm going to give you 100 points or 100 coins in a gaming
Right.
kind of an environment, right? So that's a very simple and a basic level example, but actually it has a lot of testing that needs to go into place, because there is context, there is this policy application, and there is this AI principle that really need to look upon, right? And red teaming helps address that.
We're coming up on time, but I want to maybe get your take on whether there's any other insights from your perspective that we want to share with our listeners before we cut out and get back to work.
Driving this whole work responsibly, ethically, and ensuring that the people first culture is absolutely taken care of. So I think these are the areas where we would love to partner with lot of the companies who are building their product, and I think we are really well positioned in this space.
So fun stuff. We'll have more of these conversations. It's always fun to see you. Hopefully you've settled back in after your weeks of travel, and I will talk to you soon. You can find us at www.taskus.com. You can follow us on social media with LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This is Brett Ransom. I'm signing out, and you all have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.